Welcome to Windy City Meeples podcast. I'm your host Shane, and with always my co-host Kyle. What's been going on, Kyle?
Well, today, Shane, I thought we'd talk about expansions, fear of missing out, and at the end of the day, do we need it all when it comes to our games?
That is a very good topic because I am a collector and it is nerve-wracking. I can say that.
Well, you start running out of space to put things. As you can see, I'm surrounded by my collection of Aeon's End. And on our first podcast, I believe I mentioned this is one of my favorite games.
I believe you did, and you have a lot of it. I'm counting 8 boxes, just quick scanning that. Wow, there's a lot more to Aeon's End than I even knew.
And a little pitch for them here. There's another Kickstarter coming in a couple months. So there's even more. But I think that's what led me to this topic today because I love this game so much, and wherever my boxes are organized here, wherever the first one is, which is so hard for me to tell right now, but the main box I've played everything, so I've got through all that content. The legacy version I'm about halfway through, but that leaves about 7 boxes that I've never touched. 3 of them that still have the plastic sealing on them. So I led myself saying, do we really need it all?
So what you're saying is like this might be a little intervention for yourself, seeing that there's a Kickstarter for Aeon's End coming out.
Yeah, and I guess you know what led me to that, Shane, is when we were
Yeah.
the other day, we were playing Everdale, right? And I was like, I had a boatload of fun, and I just played the base game. And I thought maybe, this is something you could speak more to because I know you have all the other expansions, but it was just easier to teach with just the base game. But I was like, man, I had just as much fun. And then I was thinking, at what point when do you hit that point? Do you need to have the next addition, like the next part? Like, when do you need more?
I don't know if you ever need more, but I know that sometimes they come out with some really great concepts that maybe they didn't bring it into the first game or it wasn't fully fleshed out. So, like for Everdell example, I have everything for that. I because that's how I got it was through the Kickstarter for the expansions, and really the one expansion I would say is a necessity for some more strategy because it gives you these bigger meeples you can ride on, and those are a real cool addition. And they don't come up in every game either. Like uh, playing a lot of uh, two-player games with just my wife and myself, you don't tend to go through the cards that contain them as often. But they're a great change to the game and can really change your strategy. And so I really do like that. I learned it with the Pearlbrook expansion. It's nice, but uh, I think the main game it really doesn't change to me a lot. It does bring in like I know it's when we played. There's a little cardboard bonus point spots you can go to. It does replace those with some real big point uh, 3D cardboard pieces. So you can be going for like 25, 30 point bonuses, which is quite a big swing. They're harder to get, but like I said, that it's nice, but it's not necessary. It's more variety if you kind of feel you've mastered the base game. That's when I would say you need an expansion. Is if you feel that you completely have the game figured out, then it's nice to throw in something that maybe makes you have to reassess your strategy and figure it out again.
And I guess that would be the idea behind expansions, right? Is that they're to give people more who love the concept of that game. And I fully heartily agree, but I know me and you, we both have growing game collections. So it's, are we at what point do we reach that point of being, needing that extra content?
Yeah, I mean, like you pointed out, just even with the game that you love, you haven't even really scratched the surface of the content you have, and
Hmm.
you're picking up other games as well. Which
Right.
I mean, in this day and age, it's a little harder to get them to the table. But I mean, I've got a pile of games that I've barely gotten to the table, if ever. And
Yeah,
I'm getting 2 more this week. Sorry.
yeah, and I'm just like looking at this, and the base game of Aeon's End, like, I have it up there as one of my favorite games. But if I only had that base game, I don't feel like I'd feel that same way, right? Because I've played each. boss. It's a boss battler, right? Like I played each one a couple times. They're unique, they're different, but it would get repetitive fast, right? But I fell in love with the world so much. I did one of their recent Kickstarters, and then I added on the add-on pledge for every little tiny box single expansion. So I have everything that game's ever made. So you talked about wanting to be a collector, right? So at this point, I almost have that feeling that I just have to keep going. Like I got to have it all, right? But then that's where again, that question comes in, do I need it? However, I guess the unique spot, and this will segue us into the third part of this conversation, is the fear of missing out, especially when it comes to Kickstarter. Because the cool thing is, with my Aeon's End, is these guys do hit retail. Often the big boxes are the same price, but when you kickstart it, they kind of include the little 2 small ones in there, and you're saving a nice bit of money. But there's not a ton of exclusives. Like there's a couple promo cards, but you definitely could get away with not having that FOMO to speak of as much, because there's a good chance you can pick these up later. You might miss out on a couple cards, but you'll still have the main game. But what about all these games that are Kickstarter exclusive that we're not going to see all these extras? Do you experience that fear of missing out?
I live with it actually with 2 of the games that I enjoy. Blood Rage. I never got the Kickstarter edition. I was new to the board games and the Kickstarter in general when that was on Kickstarter, so I never kickstarted it. But they have other monsters and stuff that I never got, and I've looked for them. And good on Simon when they say something's exclusive. It pretty much stays exclusive. But I mean, it's if you want to be a completionist like myself, it becomes really hard and really pricey to try and finish out your set. And the other game I have is this Path of Light and Shadow. It has some upgrade cards for this Wanderer race in the game, but there's certain ones that were only Kickstarter exclusive, and I have not found those anywhere, like eBay, nothing. And I want them because they're one of the random things apart about the game. Like when you upgrade them, you randomly get one of these cards, and so it's not like it's just a little randomness to your strategy, and they all are powerful and they're fun to play with and great art. But so yeah, I mean, the fear of missing out is real. Like, and some of these Kickstarters and I don't know what's the other site, GameFound or
GameFound, yeah.
Yeah, they really some of the publishers on those places really push that to get their product funded, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I have fallen more in love with the Shem Phillips Scarpill Games thing, and he pretty much, as far as I can see from everything I've kickstarted, never has anything exclusive. If you can get it in the Kickstarter, you can eventually get it in retail. Maybe, like you said, I'm getting a bonus couple little boxes that, like if you want the metal coins, you're going to have to upgrade that yourself later, but they'll be available. Stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I think they're especially Kamon or Simon, however you want to pronounce it. That's the bread and butter, hey, because that's part of what I was thinking about with this discussion. Because again, my games haven't arrived yet, but Massive Darkness 2 was one that I pretty much went all in on last summer. Because again, I was like, these miniatures are sweet. Like you're getting all this essentially free content. Because I guess to put a perspective for everyone else out there, I bought Massive Darkness 1 retail. And I've played, I think, 3 or 4 scenarios now. It's a pretty fun game. You just get to slay a bunch of monsters, upgrade your weapons. And it's nice. Like, it's fun. But you just have those 6 characters. And I was looking back to their Kickstarter page. And it was like 10 bonus playable characters. And like another handful of like monsters and all that you got for free, essentially. Because it ended up being... I think the final price was like $20 more than retail, but it like tripled the components just about.
Yeah.
And
Some
again,
of those things are insane.
Yeah, like you said, I'm looking them up on eBay and stuff, and it's like, hey, do I want to pay $500 for this, or I guess I'm not getting it, right? So with Massive Darkness, I was like, okay, I didn't quite go all in because there was one level, one box. It was just one giant dragon and like 6 miniatures, and it was $60 American. And I'm like, I'm already at like $250 for this game. I won't make it 300, but I basically was all in for that, right?
Yeah.
And then we know recently here in the last few months there was Primal, and I went all in on that one. The good thing is, as much as I'll say I have a lot of Aeon's End, all those like 8 boxes plus Legacy, I still think we're cheaper than Primal all in. So, so there's something can be said about that when you don't have hordes and hordes of plastic miniatures.
And even with the fear of missing out is not even just the exclusive nowadays. I played a game with a mutual friend of ours when we still had game nights. It was just, I believe it was called Thieves Den or something. They had kickstarted it, and it was just a fun little, uh, I don't even know, worker placement card playing kind of game. But I've actually, because it was a small box game, and I've kind of been looking for more small box stuff for my collection. I would look for it, and it's like I can't even find it. Like I can find it's for sale used through the Board Game Geek Market, or I I think I found it maybe new on their market as well. But I mean, it's really not easy to find. So some of these games hit Kickstarter, and if you didn't buy it at Kickstarter, you may never own a copy, depending on how well the retail side does afterwards.
I think that's a really good point. And as you were talking there, I was just trying to compare some successful Kickstarters. We know recently I've got Sleeping Gods, and we'll be talking about that in one of our other podcasts. But they had 12,000 backers, right? And I know that one is going to hit retail, but when that came out, there's only 12,000 copies, right? Other big ones, I was looking just at the zombie side and stuff. They were about 12,000, and those are those big box games, right? That are really
Yeah,
popular, and they get a ton of marketing dollars kind of put towards it, or they're just covered by every YouTube channel in existence, basically.
yeah.
So you're right. Like some of those smaller ones, 5,000 backers, like there's 5,000 copies of that game on the planet. Like even you're right, even if it is a cheaper game, you're really hoping for a reprint, right?
Well, especially if you play it and like it and you missed out. Like, yeah, so it is a real thing, and it's not just for the exclusives, because if it's not successful enough, Kickstarter is the only printing usually. Maybe
Right.
when I've been looking into games and stuff and following a Canadian board game publisher, like designer and publisher, and just kind of listen to his Kickstarter things, like, yeah, he's going to get X copies for the backers, of course, but then built in, I think, was X amount of copies for retail. So, but I mean, once that first printing's done, yeah, there might never be a second printing, depending on how well it sells in retail and how much people want to back it or want it back, right? Like our local store could get maybe a copy or two in. If it sells out, they may never restock it unless people are like, "Hey, we want it, we want it." And you need enough people around the
Right.
world saying, "Hey, we want it," before they print it again, right? So,
So at the end of the day, I guess you'd say that you're comfortable putting your money down ahead of time so you can potentially prevent that fear of never being able to own that game.
I wouldn't say I'm comfortable, because sometimes they're duds, but I've had enough experiences now where I have missed out that I second guess myself a lot. Like I play a game, like, oh, that would be a great game to have around for like the parents or something. It's easy
Right.
and simple and quick, but yeah, I missed out, and finding it is hard. And then there's other ones that I just got sucked into. I bought this game called Starving Artist. It was when I first was looking into how to make build board games. There was a site where you could buy pieces and stuff to build your own prototypes and that. And someone had, I don't know if they went through Kickstarter. I'd have to go back and look at that. But on this site, basically this site was selling that game, saying, "Oh, well, you can," or advertising that game, saying, "Well, all the components were from here. Like we did it all, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, it looked really interesting." And then I'm like, found that you could buy it. It was only like a 30 US dollar game, right? But
Okay.
they wouldn't ship to Canada. But I'm
Oh,
like, oh,
yeah.
I'm like, my wife will love this game. I need to get it. So I ended up shipping it to family in the States and then paying for them to ship it here. All total, it cost me like $90 Canadian for this $30 board game, and my wife hates it.
Ah,
So it's so there's the other side of fear of missing out is
right.
you,
Yeah, the
you might
fear,
just you
the
might
fear of
dive in.
paying. No, and
Yeah,
I guess Shane, I think I'd be like willing to have this conversation again in a year from now because with the amount of Kickstarters I have coming, there's a few that I've went all in, and there's a few that mostly, honestly, the fear of missing out was there, but financially, I was like, I can't go all in on another game. Let's just
yeah.
get the base and see what happens. So once I think I try some of those games, it might be a whole nother story. So I guess I appreciate you taking the time to just talk through some of this. I guess at the end of the day, there is really no right or wrong answer. But we will say if you, I guess from Shane and myself, if you're playing a game, if you go to buy a game and you think I might only play this 5 or 6 times, you probably don't need all those expansions. You probably don't need those add-ons. If you have the opportunity, probably better to get the base game first, play it a little bit, and then decide to get the expansions once you fall in love with the game and you know it's something you're going to add in your collection. However, I realize Kickstarter makes that really hard with all their exclusives and their timed honored stuff. But I will say, like Shane said, you have your duds, you have your pros. I love Aeon's End. Might take me 10 years to get through all this stuff, but I've loved every single game I've played. So I guess there's the happy side of it too.
And that's what it comes down to. It's like you said, it's attention span. Some games or some guys or gamers will play it like 2 or 3 times and then on to the next hotness, right? So yeah, if you're that type of player and you know you're that type of player, you don't need all the stuff. But you love Aeon's End. I see it in your eyes when we play it. I see it when you talk about it. You're passionate about it. So for you, getting it all makes sense because you're going to enjoy it. You're not dumping it 2 weeks from now. You're going to play through it. So I guess that's where you got to balance. Like, what type of gamer are you? Do you have the attention span to like give the attention and respect to some of these games that they deserve and play them through and see every nook and cranny of it? Or are you just jumping from hotness to hotness because I mean that's the world we are. Like,
I was gonna say, yeah, the world wants you to go from thing to thing to thing.
I mean, an example of that is I kickstarted a game called Valhalla from this Polish company, Go On Board Games, I believe. They're in the news now because they're doing The Witcher Old World
Okay.
with CD Project Red. But when I kickstarted that, I was like so excited. It's this dice kind of battling game. It's really neat. My wife likes it, and a few people I've trotted it out to love it. But when that campaign ended, they trotted out another game. Like,
Hmm.
I don't even think their pledge manager was closed for Valhalla, and they had started this Titans game, which was like a big dudes on a map, kind of like a fantasy risk game, but with like some special powers. Then you had these special Titans for each side that did other stuff. And they actually admitted in their Kickstarter later that we should never have run 2 campaigns that close together. They had a lot of problems with dealing with issues for Valhalla while trying to get things going for Titans. But I mean, that's the world we live in. It's like it's out the door. You don't even have it in your hands, and you're moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it ends up sitting in your closet, right? Just with the wrap on it
Yeah,
still. And it's interesting to say, I've seen a lot of board game companies now, especially on Kickstarter, where they've like made rules or like, okay, we won't sell you another game until the other one's like shipped and delivered. And it's funny because like people get hate on, right? Those comments. And I mean, that's a topic for another day, right? But
yeah.
yeah, it is really interesting to see how, it's that next big thing. So I guess at the end of the day, when you have a game you love, there's nothing wrong with, sitting there and instead of saying what's new, let's play what's new out in the world. Say what's new on my game shelf. What
Yeah.
can I play that I haven't? And there was a couple other YouTube channels I watch, and it's just like ways to maintain your board gaming addiction. And they're like challenge yourself at least once a month to play a game on your shelf that you haven't yet before you're allowed to buy a new one, you know? So just
It makes sense.
that's all right. Well, I think, Shane, that's all I have to say on the FOMO and expansions, and I do want to recover this again once I get that big pile of games coming in. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it over to you to sign us out.
Okay, this has been the Windy City Meeple podcast with Kyle and Shane. You can contact us on Instagram at Windy City Meeples or email us at windycitymeeples@gmail.com. You can find this podcast on YouTube and all other places you'll find your podcasts, and I hope you guys enjoy. Good night.
Happy gamings. Take care.